Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player Unmatched Marvel games published by Restoration Games, who helped sponsor this video. There's more than one Unmatched Marvel set, and each has its own characters and locations, allowing 2 to 3 players to battle one another as their favorite Marvel heroes and villains. But you can also combine sets to mix and match the characters and locations, allowing up to 4 people to play at once. In this video, I'm going to assume that we have just 2 players going head-to-head using the Hell's Kitchen set. But the rules I share will apply no matter which box you have, and I may occasionally show examples using characters from Redemption Row when needed. But no matter which box you're using, there can only be one winner. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, place the double-sided board in the center of the play area. It will show the same map on both sides, but offers 2 ways of representing the spaces, either with their patterns filled in for extra clarity, or if you want to see more of the background art, the circles on this side have the patterns, but just on the edges of each space. Otherwise, the 2 sides play the exact same. Now find these battlefield item tokens, which come in 2 types: schemes, which have a yellow symbol, and combat items, which have a purple symbol. Randomly assign a token to each space of the board that shows its matching type of symbol. And these tokens have 2 sides. One which focuses mostly on the artwork, while the other side shows the rules for the token, which can be helpful when you're first learning. But no matter which side is face up, players can look at either side at any time while playing. Each person now chooses one of the 3 included heroes. In the Redemption Row box, you'll find Moon Knight, Luke Cage, and Ghost Rider. In the Hell's Kitchen set, we'll find Daredevil, Bullseye, and Elektra. And for this video, we'll have Daredevil and Elektra face off against one another. Each player takes their character's figure and collects their deck of action cards, which will show their character's name on the back. A hero also has a character card that should be set nearby as well, and this will show their hero's starting health in this area. So collect the health dial showing their name and then set it to that value. Some heroes, like Luke Cage, have a sidekick that fights alongside them, and if so, they'll be listed here. Misty Knight, in this case, and a hero's sidekick is represented by a separate token, which they should collect. A sidekick will also have its own health dial, which is set to the values shown here, like I've already done. Some heroes will have more than one sidekick, and if so, each sidekick doesn't get its own health dial. Instead, this value is how many sidekicks will fight with them. So this means Elektra fights with 4 members of the hand. Elektra is also unique because she has 2 hero cards, and you keep the one labeled as resurrected behind the other one at the start of the game. Her health dial is also 2-sided and starts with the resurrected side face down. Some heroes like Ghost Rider here come with additional pieces like these Hellfire tokens, which you'd also collect as well. At the start of the rulebook, you'll find a list of all the pieces that go with each hero if you ever need to double check. Each player now shuffles their action cards into a face down deck and draws an opening hand of 5 cards. You can look at your own cards at any time, but keep them a secret from your opponent. The youngest player now sets their hero on the space of the board marked with a 1. The next player sets their hero into the space marked with a 2. And if a player has sidekicks, as Elektra does, those are put into separate empty spaces within the same zone as their hero. Spaces that share the same color pattern are said to be part of the same zone. And if a space has several colors, it's part of all of those pictured zones. So with Elektra here, her sidekicks can start in any spaces that share the dark gray pattern, which means they could go into any one of these 5 spaces. Just keep in mind, you can never have more than 1 fighter in the same space. This is a good time to mention that although all of the characters on the board are considered fighters, a miniature is known as a hero, and the tokens are specifically known as sidekicks. And that's the setup. In Unmatched Marvel, you and the other players will be taking on the roles of Marvel heroes and villains, battling for victory against your opponents. And if you reduce your opponent's health to 0, you win. The game is played over a series of turns, starting with the youngest player and then going back and forth. And on your turn, you must perform 2 actions. If you flip over your character card, you'll see a summary of a turn and a reminder here that you must take 2 actions on your turn. You can't take just 1. There are 3 different actions a player can choose from, as shown here, and when taking your actions you can pick 2 different ones, or repeat the same one twice. So let's see how each of these work, starting with the maneuver action, which begins by drawing a card from your deck. Anytime the game tells you to draw cards, unless otherwise stated, you must do it. And if your deck is ever empty, which means most of the cards will probably be in your discard pile, then your fighters are said to be exhausted. Anytime you need to draw a card when your deck is empty, you don't draw anything, and instead, each of your fighters take 2 damage for each card you couldn't draw but were meant to. Anytime a fighter takes damage, reduce its health dial by the related amount. Sidekicks that don't have a health dial are said to have a health of 1 and are defeated if they take any amount of damage. When a sidekick is defeated, just remove it from the board. But if your hero is defeated, the game just ends and your opponent wins. Going back to the maneuver action, after drawing 1 card, you may now choose to move any number of your fighters, and each can go up to a total number of spaces equal to or less than your move value, which is printed here on your character card. 3 spaces in this case. When taking this action, you also have the option of boosting your movement by discarding a single card from your hand into your personal discard pile, adding its boost value, printed here, to your normal movement value. So by choosing this one, I would now be able to move each of my fighters up to 5 spaces each. To count spaces, you go from the one you're in to an adjacent space, and spaces are considered adjacent if they're connected by a line. If you control several fighters like the Elektra player does, then you can move through friendly ones, but not through enemies, and must always end your move on an empty space. The order in which you move your fighters is up to you, but you must finish moving one fighter before you start moving another. And you don't have to move all of them the same number of spaces. Elektra, as we see here, has a base move value of 2, which means each of her pieces can move either 1, 2, or even 0 spaces. Some effects might let you move an opponent's fighter, and if so, you must still respect all of the normal movement rules, but from the perspective of your opponent. Another option on your turn is to perform a scheme action, and to do this, you play a scheme card from your hand, which will have this symbol in its top left corner. You then declare which of your fighters is playing the scheme, and the one you choose must be listed here. This can matter when you have a deck with different fighters. For example, in Luke Cage's deck, this scheme can only be used on Luke Cage. It couldn't target his sidekick Misty. This also matters because you can't play a scheme or any other type of card you might have in your deck if the fighter listed on it is defeated. This isn't a scheme card. This is actually for attacking or defending, which we'll talk about later, but it says Misty Knight on the side. So if Misty Knight was defeated, I could not play this card as an attack or defense card for Misty Knight. That said, you can still play cards like this from your hand to boost a maneuver, as we saw earlier. Assuming you can play the scheme, the chosen fighter is considered the active one, and then you resolve the effect here. This tells us that we get to move Daredevil up to 4 spaces, but in this case, he can move through opposing fighters and deals 1 damage to each enemy he moves through this way. After resolving a scheme, you then discard it. Each player will have their own discard pile, and players are allowed to check the contents of any discard pile at any time. If a player's figure is on a space with a scheme token, they can resolve its effect. For example, this first aid kit lets the player recover 2 health on that character's health dial, and then they draw 1 card. After you resolve one of these tokens, you then return it to the box. Using a scheme token counts as one of your 2 actions for the turn, but it does not count as playing a scheme card. So any effects that trigger when a scheme card is played do not resolve when a scheme token is used. Okay, this brings us to the final type of action, an attack. To perform this, announce the fighter that is attacking and then play an attack card that shows their name on the side. This makes them the active fighter, and then you perform 3 steps, starting with declaring their target. A fighter, like Daredevil here, who has this melee symbol beside their name, can only attack an opponent who's in an adjacent space. I'm setting up a new example here using Bullseye because I want to show you that some fighters have this ranged symbol. They can still target enemies in an adjacent space, but they can also target a fighter anywhere in their same zone. Bullseye is currently standing on a space showing 2 different zone types, so with an attack, Bullseye could target Elektra here, or either of these hand sidekicks. I should mention, fighters may have a unique special ability printed here that is available to them anytime it applies. So keep that in mind while playing. For example, Bullseye can attack a target up to 5 spaces away, even if it's in a different zone. Either way, if you don't have a valid target, you can't attack. But assuming that you do, the attacker then chooses and places one attack card from their hand face down in front of themselves. An attack card shows red in the corner and a burst symbol, and remember, it's played face down, hidden from the defender. After, the defender may pick one defense card to play face down. Defense cards will have a blue shield symbol here, but the defender doesn't have to play a defense card if they can't or don't want to. In your deck, you may also find cards with purple in the corner and this icon, which means they're versatile. These can be played as either attack or defense cards and count as both for the purposes of other game effects. Once both players have chosen their cards, they're revealed and you move to the final step of the attack, resolving combat. Most attack and defense cards have effects at the bottom with a note at the start for when they occur, either immediately, during combat, or after combat. When both cards have been revealed in an attack, you resolve any immediately effects, and then, when done, you resolve any during combat effects. If 2 effects ever appear to resolve at the same time, let's say both players had revealed immediately effects, then the defenders will always resolve first. Let's assume these 2 cards were played in this attack. Once any immediately or during combat effects have been resolved, check the value of the attack card shown here, and then subtract the defense value, if any, showing on the defender's card. The leftover amount, 3 in this case, is the damage that the defending fighter takes, and they subtract this from their health dial. With the damage assigned, if any, you then resolve any after combat effects on the cards that were played. And you resolve them even if they're on the card of a fighter that was just defeated in that combat. Unless the defeated fighter was a hero, because if a hero is defeated, the game just ends. Some effects resolve based on who won or lost the combat, and the attacker is counted as winning if they dealt at least 1 damage to the defender, but not counting any damage they might have caused from special abilities. The defender wins the combat if they took no direct damage from the attack, even if they took some other damage from special abilities. Either way, assuming the game isn't over, any played cards from the combat are put into their owner's discard piles. When fighting, also pay attention to the space your character is on, because if one of these tokens are beside it showing the versatile symbol, you may choose to use it if you like. If you're attacking and want to use it, you take it from the board and set it beside the attack card that you've played face down. And you must do this before your opponent has chosen whether or not they want to play a defense card. If instead your fighter is defending while on a space with one of these tokens, you can also take it to use as long as you're choosing to play a card during the attack as well. Whether you're using one of these tokens as the attacker or defender, when your card is revealed, you treat this token as if it has added a during combat effect to the card you've played that increases the value on the card by the value showing on the token. So now Daredevil's total attack value is 5. Then, after the combat, the token is returned to the box. By the way, if the card you've played already has a during combat effect, then you can choose the order in which these 2 effects resolve. And those are the 3 possible actions: maneuver, scheme, and attack. And remember to take advantage of your character's special ability as printed on their card. For example, when Daredevil attacks or defends, he gets a blind boost, which means that he draws the top card of his deck and adds its boost value to his total attack or defense. Elektra's ability causes her to be resurrected the first time she's defeated. Her health dial starts at 7, and when it hits 0, you flip her dial over to show that she's been resurrected and now has 9 health remaining. You also remove her normal character card and reveal this new resurrected one with new effects. Once Elektra is defeated on her resurrected side, her opponent wins. We're not going to go through all the details of the hero abilities here, but you can refer to this section of the rulebook that explains them in detail if you have any questions. So getting back to a player's turn, once they've performed 2 actions, their turn ends. And while you can have any number of cards in your hand during your turn, at the end of a turn, if you have more than 7, you must discard down to 7. Then it's your opponent's turn. And turns will continue like this, back and forth, until a player defeats their opponent's hero, winning them the game. If you have 3 players, there are rules for a free-for-all match between 3 heroes. And if you have another Unmatched Marvel set, you can use any 4 heroes together to play a 4-player team game. You'll find this explained at the back of the rulebook, and those rules I'll leave for you to discover on your own. Otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Unmatched Marvel. If you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.